And Peter was instrumental, I mean, he is instrumental to all the refugees that come to Coventry to resettle here under governmental programs and UN programs. And he was also instrumental for our project, the Offer House project, where we interviewed some of his clients. He embraced the idea as much as us, and he made all he could in order to make everything possible for us to actually undertake that project. And for that, I would like to publicly thank you. And also, of course, given his experience on the actual hands-on resettling people straight from conflict areas in the UK, we invited him to speak to us and to help us to understand more of it. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you. So thank you very much for having me here today. I was just remarking over coffee. We've got a bit of contrast in terms of the theoretical nature of some of the talks, and I'm very much coming from the practitioner perspective and hoping to talk about my experience of leading Coventry's resettlement and integration work over the last 3 years. And it's very much been a journey, and very much been something that has been focused on learning through doing, if you like. We as a City Council have been going through a considerable amount of change over the whole period that we've been doing resettlement work. The local authorities reducing its annual spending by around between 40 and 50% over a 5-year period. And so 10 years ago, if you come to Coventry, you would have found a team of staff who were geared up, and their priority was around dealing with the needs of new communities and helping them to settle, taking the edges off any issues between different communities, and being a real resource for the council to be quite active in promoting community cohesion and integration. Very sadly, those resources are gone, and when the local authority was approached, in 2014 as to whether or not it would like to take part in the resettlement of Syrian refugees, it fell to the head of the library service to be the person who was handed the baton, and so my journey goes back to January 2014. Prime Minister made an announcement in the House of Commons that notwithstanding all the aid and different other work that the UK was doing in and around Syria, in the countries around Syria, and supporting the many millions of refugees even by then, he made the concession, really under considerable amount of pressure, including support from people like Nigel Farage, to say that the UK should do its bit. And so we accepted that we will accept the most vulnerable Syrian refugees, and the Home Office's plan was very much that would be the most vulnerable Syrian refugees, up to around 400 or 500 was what they were planning. So a modest enterprise, to be fair. And the city's initial agreement was to accept 50 people over 6 months. That was our plan, within the context of the UK government's 400 or 500. Here's Mustafa. Hello, my friend. How are you? Nice to see you. Come in, sit down. I'm talking about you. So our initial approach was we would take Coventry would do its bit. Coventry was the second local authority who was planned to accept Syrian refugees. Bradford were the first, following ourselves, Glasgow, and then Leeds. And so, July 2014, the first of our Syrian families arrived. I have to say, first time I'd ever met a Syrian person. Met many more since then, including Reem. And as a local government officer who's been 15 to 20 years working in local authorities delivering public services, I would say a very proud day in terms of my public service to be able to welcome the first Syrian refugees to the city, and something that I still do now as head of service. We've got 31 people coming next week. I'll be there at the airport to meet them and to give them a warm welcome on behalf of the city. And for us that really sets the tone of how we want to make people welcome in Coventry. So you'll know that many local authorities refuse to take part in Syrian resettlement, very many. That's why I mentioned the fact that we were one of three really initially. So very quickly we were asked to take more. We agreed to do that, and then before long we have, you know, what we think of as almost like a, you know, it was a refugee crisis before, but this picture kind of illustrates really what became, you know, much more prevalent in the public consciousness, a real crisis that everybody had to assist with. So we'd already got arrivals planned from our second group, but they very quickly became the first of the 20,000 that the UK government then made the new commitment between then and 2020. And our situation at the moment is that we're committed to taking 100 to 125 people a year until 2020. That is a number that is very modest, but it's the largest single locality programme in the UK, and you know we're very proud of the fact that we've taken as many people as we have. But it is an assessment of what we think local resources can manage, and what our capacity is to do a good job in terms of resettlement and integration, and it is absolutely ongoing. Again, talking to colleagues earlier, we've got 31 people arriving at Birmingham Airport on Tuesday morning, which we'll be looking forward to be welcoming them. Again, we're also involved, one of only a small number of authorities who are involved in what's called the Resettlement of Vulnerable Children project, which is the government's answer to the sort of national outcry about children and vulnerable children and how they can be supported and how the UK can support them. Of course, in reality, the government's position is that if there's children in France or Greece or Italy and they're in a safe place, then those are the places where they seek asylum. And as far as the government's concerned, that's kind of our position. So what the government have said is that again, I think it's 3,000 people between last year and 2020. Who come from the Middle East and North African countries that are affected by significant conflicts and creating flows of refugees. Those are families, so families will be able to come where there are vulnerable children included in those families, or children with a significant carer will be able to come to the UK. And so effectively what we've said is amongst our 100 to 120 per year refugees, we'll include a small number of clients through that programme. So now we have Iraqi families, some Sudanese families and one Afghan family who've come through that route. We've, because of, again, talked about bureaucracy earlier, didn't we? And you know, I'm a local government, you know, middle manager kind of thing. So we basically pick Arabic-speaking families from the resettled vulnerable children. And we put them alongside our Syrian friends, and you know, it's gone very, very well in terms of our Sudanese and Iraqi people who've come under that programme, mixing in with the Syrian people, and hopefully we provide a nice package for them. So we, as I said at the beginning, the resources that we would once have had gone, and we very much were clear that the City Council couldn't manage a resettlement programme by itself, so we've very much relied on our third sector in Coventry, and principal amongst those is Citizens Advice Coventry, Coventry Law Centre, Coventry Refugee and Migrant Centre, but also a whole range of other organisations who've really put their shoulders to the wheel and helped us in terms of you know, from very low level welcome events and engaging in, including our Syrian people in festivals and events that go on in the city, to other organisations, perhaps Positive Youth Foundation, who've taken a really active role in helping young people to mix with other young people in the city and to take on activities that help people to gain confidence and to develop different ways of achieving, because of some of the challenges in many ways that refugees are faced with. So what do we do? As I said, the first thing is we offer people a very warm welcome. People are welcome in Coventry. We really Coventry's part of the City of Sanctuary movement. We would badge ourselves as an international city of peace and reconciliation. We're positive about the role refugees can play in the city and newly arrived communities can play in the city. So we offer a warm welcome. We arrange people to have a house. So we set them up with a house before they come. The government provide funding for beds, fridges, dining room table, the basics. We always have a bit of a joke with our people that the one thing they absolutely forbid us from providing is a television. And so when the Syrian people arrive, we have to point them in the direction of how they can find themselves a television, because we are not allowed to provide a television because that's a luxury item, which I'm sure you'll agree with. But importantly, of course, we connect people to central GP practice in the city. We register them with DWP for their benefits. But again, I think an issue to raise quite early is that people who come to the UK are entitled to the benefits that people who are in the UK already are entitled to, and that is a real challenge. There is no, I don't know. I occasionally see things on Facebook where you won't believe what this refugee family have got, and you won't believe the special circumstances that people are given. It's absolutely not the case. Refugee families are entitled to only exactly the same as other people, and there is no account taken of the special circumstances that refugees find themselves in before they come either. So we have here Adnan and Zainab, his beautiful daughter. She's got many challenges, and he and his wife Arifa have many challenges in terms of supporting her and looking after her. Because of the nationally, politically driven changes to the benefits system, when they arrived, despite the fact that they made the programme because of the fact that Zainab has learning and physical disabilities, they were denied access to disability-related benefits on the basis of the fact that they didn't comply with the domestic residence rule, having not lived in the UK for 2 years, which is of course something that was introduced to deter benefits tourism from elsewhere within Europe, but in a very much one-size-fits-all. It affected Zainab, particularly for children with learning difficulties and physical disabilities. In many ways they were kind of grateful for the benefits they got and they kind of got on with it, but in many ways, for access for children to certain services, the benefit is used as the test as to whether or not they can access the services. So we would go to a service provider, a children's centre for example, and say we want to help the family by providing some services, accessing some services at the children's centre. And they'd say, has she got her child DLA sorted out? And we'd say, no, she's not entitled to child DLA. And they'd say, oh well, she can't access the service then. So they've changed that now, about 12, 18 months after the programme started. You can imagine for us as practitioners, that was a bit of a challenge, because particularly going back to the very first slide, the most vulnerable. So we have many families with disabled children. We have many families with one of the adults having a significant disability. So the fact that we were saying to people, you made the programme because you've got significant medical needs or disabilities and so on, but actually no, you can't access disability-related benefits was very challenging. Obviously we connect people to schools, the council arranges for school places, look very early to get adults into ESOL. Real challenge, thinking about some of the things in the previous talk and some of the challenges for refugees in terms of how they adapt to life in the UK. I think we've had 360 odd people, maybe 10 people arrived speaking English to the level that would be able to take part in the conversation today. So, a real big issue, helping people to learn English. A real struggle for people to access enough English to be able to do it well. The same year that we started the resettlement programme, government made changes to the Skills Funding Agency to reduce local authority grants for providing ESOL. And again, going back to the question that one of the other gentlemen raised a minute ago, constant challenges in terms of whether people are able to access services or not, dependent on their immigration status and so on, and a lack of connectiveness in terms of understanding what some of those kind of key first steps people have to go through in their first, month, 6 months, year living in the UK. ESOL being a really key thing. Well, don't do that. Excuse me. So when we started 2014, I think very much our approach was, we're doing a really good